What's up YouTube, this is Paul from Mickey Tech Tips, and today this is episode 1 of my Linux PC. And so we're going to be covering some basic prep work in these first few episodes, and today is going to be covering switching out the single core processor to a dual core processor and addressing some other issues that I've been having with this, because even though Linux is a very power efficient and resource efficient OS, we want to have something that runs great on the machine we have, and we don't want to waste any resources that we could possibly have on this machine. Even though it's not worth it to an extent, it can still run Linux great. So with that, I guess we could get started. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so here's the good old PC, the Dell E510. This one was manufactured in November of 2005, so this makes it a little bit over 10 years old. But this thing still runs pretty decent today. So we're going to be talking about taking this off, which is the heatsink, and replacing the processor. Now, I've already taken this off because I was playing on some thermal compound and trying to get better heat output on this, because this thing was getting a little hot. So I'm going to set up the camera in a different view, and we're going to take this off and change out the processor. Okay, so I am back, and so the first thing we're going to be doing is we have to ground ourselves. So right here is the power supply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the power button, and I just grounded myself, so I should not have any static electricity on me. Now the best thing to do in this case as well is static wrist strap, which would attach to the case and then attach to your wrist. But the problem is I do not own one, because I never thought about buying one until recently. But that'll be something I'm going to buy and have in future videos, but right now I've not bought one as of yet. And electric static shock is a very real thing, from what I've learned in school this past year. So I will be getting one, even though it's not a big of a deal as it used to be. It's still very real, because you can kill components very easily. So after we do that, we're going to stick our screwdriver down here into the hole, and it'll loosen up. Now most CPU heat sinks, they have 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4, but this one only has 2 because of the mechanism Dell put in here, so it isn't too hard to pop up. In fact, this one's a spring loaded heat sink, so it'll attach via a spring loaded screw onto this motherboard. So I think I got that side done. Now another thing you do want to keep in mind, you want to get some rubbing alcohol, because you're going to have to remove the old thermal compound from the heatsink. I think that should do it. And there we go. There's the thermal compound. That's going to have to come off via, what do you call it? Rubbing alcohol. And there's the old Pentium 4 processor on there. So I will be back. I got to remove this stuff from here, and also I gotta remove it from the processor, but I'll do that in a minute. So I'll be back. Alright, so I'm back. I got the thermal compound off the heat sink, as you can see right there, and time to remove it off the processor. Now one thing I do want to point out is that, remember, use rubbing alcohol to remove thermal compound. For one, rubbing alcohol isn't conductive like water is. Oh, I got some thermal compound on here, but it isn't a big deal. But anyway, rubbing alcohol isn't conductive like water is. That's one thing, because you could damage your components if you use water. And 2, thermal compound does not come off with water. And so what you gotta do, I know my phone's ringing, you gotta rub it around, and it'll come off like that. I don't have this lined right. I probably should zoom out. So let's zoom out. So should get it most of the way off. You can see that this is a Pentium 4. It's a single core processor, but it's got a very high clock speed, which is a good thing. That removes it. I'll throw that away. Thermal compound is also very messy, so watch on how much you apply. I'll have to finish cleaning this off in a minute. Oh yeah, I need to ground myself. Okay, so I have this, and this will pop out. So here's our Pentium D processor, and it'll go inside like this. Should just go in like that. It's in. Then the retention arm goes down, and we put the processor in. Now, it isn't that hard, so anyone could put in a processor. Stupid thermal compound. I'll be back. I'm going to finish getting this thermal compound off. Okay, so I'm back. Let's put some thermal compound on this new processor. Now, I do hate thermal compound because it is messy, but you got to have it in order to spread heat from the processor onto the heatsink or whatever it is, because it creates friction so it can directly pass it through without having any kind of gap. So we just put a little, because a little goes a long way, and I just learned that when I was messing with thermal compound the other day. So that should be more than enough. And then once it dries on, it isn't as bad, but it can be really bad when you first put it on. The reason why I'm saying that is because I removed the original thermal compound and nothing just broke. I just hit a glass, not a glass, but a cup made of glass with my foot, and it didn't break. I just need to take a nut, leave it in the floor. But okay, it should be on. Then what I got to do is screw it on, and like after this thing sits for a while and you use the computer, the heat will dry it out. So then it should stay. I should zoom this thing back out. Now, this processor says it does work on this computer. Now, one thing I am debating on is maybe swapping out the motherboard so I can put in one from the E520, because this is the E510, and the main difference between the 10 and the 20 is that on the 20 you can use a Core 2 Duo, which is still a fairly used processor today in a bunch of older business PCs that people use. So, still debating on if I should buy a different motherboard and swap it out, but this one works fine too. And if I did that, all I would have to do is buy the motherboard for like $60 or something, and then like a $20 processor. But that is $80 that it's not mine anymore, so I might just take and put that $80 toward a dedicated Linux PC in the future. But right now this one works because the whole purpose of this is to find a use for old computers by using Linux on them. So yeah, and that's all tight now, so it's not going anywhere. So I'm gonna go change the view and hook this up so we can see if this thing works. So I'll be right back. Alright, so here's the moment of truth. We're gonna turn on the PC to see if the processor works. We should have something now. Yes! We got a Pentium D right there. So all good to go. Now this problem will pop up. If it'll focus. It'll say incompatible processor detected. That is normal on some of these pre-built machines, and the reason why that's popping up is because it is not the original processor that is configured with this machine. Like this one was configured with a Pentium 4, and I just put a Pentium D in there. Now it still will work because it's still a compatible processor with that motherboard, but it's not the original processor with that system, so it's going to pop something like this up. So I'm going to strike the F1 key. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but oh well. And there we are. We're in my Linux boot menu, let's boot into some Linux Mint. Now, one of the things I am going to have to address is that, so we're booting into Linux Mint right now. Now, it's taken a long time, and one of the things I figured out is I was going to boot into Windows, but it's just going to take forever for me to do that, so I'm just going to explain what happens. So, what happened is I changed out the processor. I boot into Windows 10 because I still have Windows on there for testing. There we go. It booted up into Linux Mint. And after I boot into Windows 10, I open up the Task Manager just to see where all the resources are at. The processor was fine. The 2.5 gigs of RAM was somewhat fine. But the biggest problem is that the hard drive was pinging at 100% usage to about maybe 99%, which is not great, because if it's doing that, that means it's constantly having to run, which means it's constantly having to do stuff. Now, I then let the computer run for a couple hours, came back, it was down to a normal 10 to 20%, what should be when running at idle, because I don't have much on the Windows 10 installation on this PC. So then I ran a Crystal Disk Mark, which is a basically a benchmark, aka a fancy word for test for hard drives. So I ran Crystal Disk, got about 55 megabytes per second read write. That's a big problem, and the reason why that's a problem is because on a modern 2.5 inch mechanical drive, I was getting about 75 megabytes per second read write. Now, that's a big problem because that's 20 megabytes slower, which means it's going to run super slow. And I figured that out, so then I went and did some more testing. The hard drive's fine, but then I came to the conclusion that the hard drive in this is 10 years old. It needs to go because it's too slow and it's too old. So my plans I'm going to throw an SSD in here, probably something like a SanDisk one, because they're not that bad, because I got one in my other two PCs, and then redo this again, because not redo, but load Linux Mint and Windows 10 on there just to see how it runs, because I think that's the biggest bottleneck now is the hard drive. Now, some of you guys are probably wondering, why do I have Windows on here? Well, Windows has those resource manager things that Linux doesn't. So I have that on there, and so we can do some testing. And I'll probably cover this in the hard drive video and show off the graphs and all that in that video. So stay tuned for that. It'll be coming out within a couple weeks. And I'll go into depth more by showing you all the graphs and all that, but basically Windows is a really great place to do your diagnosing for the most part, because they got built-in software already, whereas Linux, I would have to go find it itself. So here we are, we're at the Linux Mint desktop. It's all up and running. So this is episode 1 of My Linux PC. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, another thing about the incompatible processor, you're going to have to hit F1 every time you boot up. Now that's a normal thing, because that is not the original processor with it. And I guess they're really picky about it on the older PCs, but you're just going to have to do that every time. So, yeah, it's not bad for your motherboard, it's just going to be a hassle. So, remember to like, comment, subscribe. I will see you guys next time on My Linux PC. Goodbye.